Okay. So I was just saying maybe I'm giving you too much information, but that's the point of this tutorial. Okay, so now I'm going to component mode. I'm going to select one of these components, shift back to shaded mode. I forgot to plug in my computer. Let me pause the recording for a second. Okay, so we're back. So I'm going to select a component. I'm going to go to my translate tool, and we have this normal mode. And what that does is each polygon object and NURBS object has what's called a normal, and that is just the direction, a vector, in which light will reflect off of the surface. Okay. Most of the time, if your object looks smooth, then at the edges on your edge flow, that means that your normals are at best it can perpendicular to its surrounding geometry. So this can be really handy while you're modeling. So I had a question earlier about how to model your jack-o'-lantern without, like, they wanted to shift some geometry around without losing the curvature of the overall mesh. Well, this is it. Okay? So because it works in normal space, I can hold down Control and click this handle, and that will change this box, this little square in the center, so that it's in line with the surface of my sphere. And now I can click on that, and it's going to stay on that surface according to its curvature. So I shouldn't lose much in the way of the curvature of my sphere at this point. Okay, so that can be really handy. If you're grabbing a group of vertices, so if I grab these 4, then you can tell it to do normals average. Okay? And then it kind of the same thing, but it does it for a group of them. And I can hold down Control, and I can just click on this handle, and it will try to move along the normals of those selected components, rather than in a world space or local space or any other kind of space. So that can be really handy when you're making small tweaks on your geometry, that you're not really wanting to lose your shape, you're just trying to correct edge flow. Okay. So you have this along rotate axes. You know, honestly, I never use these other ones. This custom axes, I've only ever needed that one time. So I'm not really going to show that to you. Okay, and then all your tools have this discrete move attribute and the step size attribute. So if you have discrete move on, which a lot of you will turn on accident somehow, there's a hotkey for it. I can't remember it. But if you turn it on accident, you're going to get this sort of movement, and you're not going to be able to refine it. Okay, because it's going to move in increments of 1. And that's 1 centimeter unless you've told Maya otherwise. So that's where you can turn that off. And that exists in, you have discrete rotate in the rotate tool, and you have discrete scale in the scaling tool. Okay, and you have a lot of these same attributes on the axes in the rotate and the scale. Yeah, so I thought I might have remembered. If you hold down J, you can temporarily use that discrete movement stuff. But when you let go, it'll go away. So I think if you accidentally press Control J or something, it locks it in. But you can figure that out on your own. Okay, now when you're editing attributes in Maya, you're not really sure, maybe it's hard to use your manipulator because it's just hard to see accurately, or you just don't want your mouse cursor in the way. Most of the time I find myself just selecting the attribute on the side in the channel box, and then you can middle mouse click, and you can adjust that attribute by dragging left. Well, on the translates it's in line with the axes, but on the rotates, if you click it and drag left and right, it's going to edit that value in your channel box. Same for the scale. It'll work like your translates. You have all these other attributes that can be edited that same way. In fact, any attribute that is editable in Maya can be edited by the middle mouse click and drag. They have uneditable attributes as well. So, in fact, you may have opened a can of worms, but there's all different kinds of attributes. A whole lot more than you know, most likely. So, I can adjust these. So in the case of radius, this is like hypersensitive. I don't have very much control over that. So I can hold down control, and I can make it less sensitive. And in fact, I can do that on the fly. If I hold down control, it will change that without me having to let go of my middle mouse button. Okay? So in fact, what it really is doing is normally when you middle mouse click, it edits in 1/10 of an increment, that attribute. And if you hold down control, it'll edit in 1/100th of an increment. So it slows it down by a factor of 10. That's the middle mouse click with control while editing an attribute. Okay. Now, the next thing that you should know, and this works through most of Maya, okay, and it's really easy. If you hold down Shift and right click, then you will get a context-sensitive marking menu for the type of object that you have clicked on. Okay, so that's a Shift right click, and this is going to give you a list of tools and manipulating commands for that particular type of object. And again, it's context sensitive. So if I switch to component mode and select a vertice, Shift right click, I'm going to get a different menu that's appropriate for vertices. So why is this so cool? Well, I don't have to move my mouse very far, and I don't have to navigate through all these menus. So I've just become a lot faster. Now, sometimes you want to manipulate your selection, and this works on polygons, but it works on nearly all kinds of objects. If you hold down Control and right click, then you can manipulate the selection. So I can grow the selection. I can tell it to change that to edges by different parameters. So contained edges only. And now I've got an edge selection. Now that I have an edge selection, I can tell it to change to faces. Now I've got faces. Okay, so that can all be really handy. Turns out there's a shortcut for growing and shrinking your selection, which can be really handy sometimes. And that is Shift and period will grow the selection. Okay, and the Shift and comma will shrink the selection, if it can figure out how to shrink it.
So if you selected your whole object, you'd be like, oh, well, right.
Yeah, it doesn't know where to shrink it to. Okay? In fact, I didn't even realize that until I was just showing you. Okay, so those are really handy. Okay, so next I'm going to show you some more deformers that I like to use in rigging, but also they're very handy for modeling purposes. First is called a soft. You have your soft select, which I think most of you may know already. Soft select works on vertices no matter what type of component you've selected. And that's activated in your tool settings.